Episode 5, A New Priestess. Lana heard her father's tired voice and Draken's calm response coming from downstairs. Father invited him over again. With trembling hands, Lana took off her nightgown and slipped into her dress. We have sunny, elegant, well-off, free, very old clothes. This is a tough one, but I'll go with... I want to go with free. But then I also want to go with the other one. I might go with sunny, yeah. It's a mixture. Think again. Stop here. Stop her. She took a comb and ran it through her hair a little nervously. I like floral. It's pretty. Yeah, we'll go floral. Stop here. When Lana was ready, she froze in the center of the room, looking at her sister's bed. She couldn't help but shudder. Her body refused to obey. She rushed out of her bedroom, almost running downstairs. Barely looking into Gran's eyes, she said, "Please help me get Varia's bed out of the room." And then she ran back upstairs. She didn't notice a shadow cross her father's haggard face. "Please help her." "All right." Dragan paused on the threshold. His eyes were fixed on Varia's crumpled pillow. Lana stood by the window, hugging herself. He would have asked her a few questions if she hadn't looked so dejected. "Can you give me a hand?" She flinched at the sound of his voice, as if he had pulled her out of the whirlpool of her own thoughts. "Yes, I'm coming." She quickly stripped the bed, picked up the pillow and blanket, and stepped aside. Dragon would have asked her a few questions if only she had looked at him. If he could have seen in her at least 1 ounce of desire to share her thoughts with him. Without saying a word, he lifted the bed by the headboard. It was heavier than he expected. It felt strange. He remembered how easily he had carried those same beds to the second floor. Right at that moment, however, he barely had the strength to lift it. "Is something wrong?" "No, it's just... it's like someone is sitting on it." Dragan shook his head, banishing the stupid thought. He strained all of his muscles and, lifting the headboard a little higher, dragged the bed down. Left alone, Lana felt relieved. It was like a window had been opened to let in fresh air. The sickly, nagging feeling of something otherworldly had left the room. She sighed, closing her eyes. "The dead should sleep in coffins. Have you been guarding me in my sleep? If so, I'm sorry." Your icy breath is suffocating me. When she went downstairs, her father was sitting on a bench, his head in his hands. His palms covered his eyes, hiding the emptiness of life from his sight. Since Varia had died, he seemed to have lost weight, aged a decade. He often got home drunk after spending time in the company of lost souls like himself. Dragan stood over him with a hand on his shoulder. When they saw Lana, they both turned to her. "Daughter, you..." He made a dismissive gesture and dropped his head into his hands again. "It hurts him. I decided to get rid of Varia's bed. I reminded him once again that my sister is gone. He doesn't want to. He still doesn't want to let go." Lana hugged her father from behind and squeezed his shoulders tightly. It's just a bed. Varia will always be with us. Her father's shoulders shook. He bent down even more, completely hiding his face in his hands. Her father cried silently, having left all of his strength at the bottom of a jug, drowning himself in wine, beer, or mead. He felt weak, broken after a sleepless night. Lotta let him go only when he calmed down and straightened up. I'm sorry. He stood up awkwardly. I need to go tend to the sheep. I'll take care of it, you just rest. She kissed him on the cheek and, taking her staff, went outside. Joanne didn't follow her and didn't say anything. When she was done with the sheep, she went to Tata's house. On the way, she met Milan, and they started walking through the village together. Oh, this time is when the evil spirits roam. What are you up to? We're not going to work. Zlatan once fell asleep on the field edge at this time of day. Never woke up again. He was 60, and we're not going to sleep either. Milan tried to not leave the house at noon, let alone at night. He was afraid of the time when the boundaries blur, and you could feel the breath of the death and the smell of their rotten flesh. I don't want to think about that. That someone from the village harmed Varia. It was night, and the haze. Varia was acting strange before it happened. That's why I want to find out the truth. You've stopped smiling. What? You've almost completely stopped smiling since then. It makes me sad. She slowed down when she realized that she was almost running across the village. Milan? Tana quickly stepped off the porch and ran up to them. Her fiery curls danced on her shoulders, mirroring her every movement. I want to help you. A wide, soulless smile tugged on Tata's lips as usual. Thank you. Milan smiled back at her, pleased by the warmth of her voice. Always happy to help. I suggest we split up. I'll start from the edge, and you start from that one. We'll talk to everyone we can. Milan clutched Lotta's arm. I'm coming with you. All right. They knocked on the first door they came to. A woman pulled a linen cloth aside, looked out the window. When she saw them, she slipped back into the darkness of the house and never opened the door. What's with her? She knows why we're here. She doesn't want to talk about the deceased. Come on. They went house to house, approached people they met and tried to find out at least something, but always got the same reply. I don't know anything. Some feared and avoided them. The problem is them. If they want to forget what happened, they're afraid of the truth. We're just asking questions. The most important thing, always start with questions. So what do we do now? Lotta looked around for Tana. She stood in the distance, surrounded by the old and the young. The crowd laughed, listening enthusiastically to her speech. Soon, one of the women began singing, encouraged by Tana. She laughed in response, smoothing down her hair contentedly, clapping her hands, and cheering for the singer. Lotta and Milan quietly joined the others. We remember those who drowned in the night. Their faces live, though hidden out of sight. We're taught to keep their wisdom in our mind. In the silence, answers to our thoughts we find. A light breeze stirred the tips of the young grass. Everyone felt quiet, captivated by the mesmerizing melody pouring out from the tired woman's mouth. O world tree with roots so deep and strong, give us answers for which we long. Why are we here? From where did we come from? What must we do to turn back to where we belong? The singer fell silent, held out her hands to Tata and kissed her slender fingers. Beauty, you made me do it again. My bad. The small crowd began to disperse. Without letting go of Tata's hands, the singer whispered, I've heard you asking around about poor Varia. I know a little something. Lotta caught Tata and Milan's nervous glances. She barely restrained the desperate urge to find out everything, then and there. Instead, she asked gently, Would you mind telling us? I saw her talking to someone, but I don't know who. What were they talking about? The singer frowned, remembering. Oh, don't you dare go near my sisters. That's what she said. Don't you dare, don't you dare. Lotta thought about it. Varia was sad that day. She was constantly glancing around as if looking for something. A person? Thank you. Thank you, Beauty. Come by more often. She smiled broadly. She looked pleased. I'd love to. As soon as they stepped a little further away, they heard the singer turn to the others, sighing. Poor no one's girl. She's holding up so well. Tata has always been alone. She was only friends with Varia, and now she's gone too. Milan spoke loudly in an awkward attempt to drown out the incessant conversations behind her back. Well done. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have found out anything. Milan is right. Thank you. He hesitated, looking at the other end of the village. I have to go. I have some errands to run. Isn't it a little late? Yes, but I, Let him go. Thanks for your help, Milan. I'm ready to help in every way possible. He said goodbye and hurried away. Lotta and Tata continued walking along the fog. The awkwardness caused by the woman's gossip loomed over the conversation like a shadow. Lotta sensed Tata's sadness, but didn't know how to lift that heaviness from her heart. Okay. Have you thought about what's out there in the haze? Have you ever visited the bones of the gods? What do you think the world would be like if there weren't for the haze? What do you think the world would be like if the gods were with us? I'm gonna ask about no haze. Tata even smiled, imagining it. Big and different. Oh, we can ask all these? Okay. Tata looked at the white wall of the swirling fog. Kushishis and all sort of evil spirits. And that's it. Even the priests don't go very far. Why do you care so much? Because one day the haze may take us. And then we'll be lost, like everyone who dared to cross the line. Have you ever visited the bones of the gods? They're deep in the forest. You might not even make it there. Only those chosen by the gods are allowed to approach the bones. Would you like to? Maybe. It would be peaceful and safe. But her voice remained tense, as if she didn't believe her own words. Alright, I guess move on. She tried to be cheerful, smiled whenever their eyes met, but it was a lie, a mask, a dreary game of being a good girl who was never sad. Open your heart. You know, I felt awkward and unworthy next to Varia. But the day she died, she said she was jealous of me. Tata looked up, interested and surprised. Lotta felt like she was on the right track, and the next confession came easier. Maybe it wasn't true. Varian always tried to praise me, even when there was nothing to praise. But I've come to realize we're all looking for heroes to become our guiding light. We may look worthless in our own eyes, unwanted, inept, but in fact we aren't. Each of us has our own paths and our own reasons to walk this earth, and you will always be able to count on yourself. Isn't that enough? Count on myself. From your first breath to your last, you have yourself. Only the gods can be closer. I agree with that. She quieted down, and Lana felt it was better not to break the silence. It was as if there was an even more important conversation hidden behind it. Soon Tata's expression changed. She shook her head as if she had been arguing with herself, frowning, and pouted like a child. I'm sorry. What are you talking about? You and Milan tried to cheer me up, and you shouldn't have had to. We met for Varia's sake. Let's not talk about me. They walked quietly through the village. Have it your way, but you know what? What? You stop smiling at me. Thank you. What do you mean? I finally had a real conversation with you. She shrugged her shoulders and looked away, muttering under her breath. You don't know anything. How dare. Mean. But despite her sharp tone, she looked grateful. Tata clutched Lana's fingers gently. Clutched her fingers. Feeling the warmth of Tata's hands, Lana looked at her. It was cautious, almost timid gesture. That was how children behaved when they struggled to put their thoughts into words. Tata was an adult, but her soul had remained innocent and vulnerable. Perhaps she wanted to scream to the whole world about what was bothering her, but she wouldn't dare, and Lana accepted it. They turned away from each other, still holding hands. You understood and accepted Tata. They walked slowly in silence, not thinking about why they felt better when their fingers were intertwined. Varia was the one who connected them, but maybe someday they were going to have their own unique bond that would have nothing to do with anyone else. After a few more minutes, Tata passed. Tata let go of Lana's hand. Lana pretended that nothing had happened, but she felt a wall had once again risen between them. Was Tata ever going to open up to her as she did with Varia? Why was she even thinking about it? Why was she trying to figure out Tata? Lana couldn't answer those questions yet. About Varia, who do you think she was talking to? It may have nothing to do with her death. It could have, she could have had an argument with anyone. So are we at a dead end again? Lana slowed down when she saw the priestess's house. Who knows? Tata followed her gaze. What are you up to? I really am helpless, but I have an opportunity to change that. Lana said goodbye to Tata and went to see the priestess. The scent of herbs was mixed with something infernal. A cold blast of air swept over her arms and legs for a moment and disappeared as if it had never happened. It was as if the door leading to the other side of the fiery river had been not fully closed, but the draft slammed it shut with a bang as soon as the guest entered. That's how it was. Those who had looked into the face of death even once were bound to it forever. Lana entered quietly, immediately froze, as still as a mouse, finding herself inadvertently eavesdropping on an argument. Siana was sobbing, while the priestess was scolding her. I told you to be careful. Do as I say. You decided to do it your way, and now what? I know, Grandma. The priestess sighed, shaking her head in disappointment, and then, only then, noticed Lana on the threshold. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Sienna blushed, covering her tear-stained face with her hair, and hurried away. The priestess watched her go and then turned to the guest, not hiding her fatigue. At the same time, that fatigue was polite, like a gift to Lotta. The priestess was being honest with her, without hiding her sadness, knowing that Lotta would be able to share it. Never apologize for something that is not your fault. It happens. Children make mistakes and have to be guided sometimes with a firm hand. I didn't scare you, did I? No, not at all. Sit down. Let your feet rest. Lotta followed her advice. How is your health? Lotta answered the questions briefly, with a smile hiding her impatience. The priestess offered food, drink, welcoming Lotta as a real guest. She seemed in no hurry to get to the point, and started talking about the main reason for their meeting only when she had gotten everything she could out of Lotta. So, do you want to open that door? Remember that there will be no way back. Am I ready to become a priestess? I am ready. I'm glad to hear it. The priestess looked at Lotta with a blind eye, her attention getting under her skin like needles. Have you seen anything unusual? Lotta bit the inside of her cheek, considering whether to talk about her visions and the birthmark. The priestess took her hand in hers and said, It's all right, there's no rush. Tell me when you're ready, or maybe you'll figure it out by yourself when you learn. Today you walked around the village asking about Varia. Did you learn anything? How does she know? Tell her about the singer's words, don't tell her anything. Tell her about the singer's words. They say Varia was fighting with someone. She was heard telling this person to stay away from me and Hannah. The priestess frowned, lowered her gray head, and as if burdened by an unpleasant thought. She frowned, as if she had made a decision, and said stubbornly, No, it can't be. What are you talking about? But her question remained unanswered, fading into the silence. Let's not waste time. She disappeared into another room and returned with a bundle of clothes. Our work can be dangerous, challenging, and bloody. Lotta swallowed hard, trying not to think about the dead animals. You'd better change your clothes. Great, I get to pay more diamonds for clothing. Choose the clothes you'll wear while working with the priests. Okay, kind of like the first one. Oh, I was like, what the hell's the red arrow for? I was like, what? Is that part of the outfit? Damn, these are some good outfits. This is gonna be tough. Even the hand-me-downs look good. Follower of priests, follower of magus, follower of priests. So they're both the same. Oh, priestess, priests. Okay, all right. I really like the wings. Damn, this one's gonna be a tough one. Hold on. Well, we are a follower of the priestess. I like the symbols around the belt, the orbs, things like that. Yeah, why not? I'm gonna go with it. Lotta ran her hand over the rough fabric. Her heart was pounding with anticipation and horror. Until recently, she couldn't have imagined that she would choose this path. Was it fate? A gift from the gods? Or their punishment? Today, I will show you our work. The priestess hobbled to the door. Lotta followed her, obediently wiping her suddenly damp hands on her clothes. The shrine. They walked to a plot of land especially loved by villagers. Amidst the sparse ancient trees, not far into the forest, a swamp spread like a dark stain. Its waters, dark, stagnant, were covered with a thick carpet of green duckweed, algae, hiding the depths and secrets lying at the bottom. The swamp used to be clear, pure as a tear, but as the breath of the gods grew weaker, its waters turned murky. And yet, amongst the moss, the mold, the massive stone idols stood towering, covered with a fine network of cracks. Their faces, calm, peaceful, still echoed the power of the living gods. Around the shrine, on time-worn slabs, lay votive cloths soaked in blood after the sacrifices. Not only the priests came here, but also ordinary people. They prayed for all sorts of things: rain, generous harvest, livestock, well-being. They left bars of metal, squirrel, marten pelts, took with them the fragrance of bark, pebbles, wax, even dirty water. Both priests were standing by the idols, whispering a prayer in unison in low, guttural tone. Their voices joined together, vibrating, filling up their lungs. The blood of the rooster they had just slaughtered had dripped from their hands. "We, your children, appear to you, for we stand in the shadow of the shrine and open our hearts. Stand up for us. Be with us in the good times and the bad ones. May your grace and protection be with us forever and always. May your grace and protection be with us forever and always." Thick fog sat low on the ground, enveloping everything in an eerie mist. Occasionally, silhouettes of black driftwood and twisted trees could be seen through it, their roots clawed at the air like gnarled fingers. Along the shore of the swamp, among the marshlands and crackling reeds, Lotta could hear the unsettling sounds of Leshy hiding in the forest's thicket. The priestess brought her there so that she could hear and feel the power of their prayers. Compared to them, the voices of ordinary people were weak and quiet. If Lotta were a goddess, she probably would never have heard them either. The priests wiped their hands and approached the waiting women. Lotta felt the weight of Volat's stare hidden behind the bull's mask. It may not be enough. The Magus needs to visit the bones of the gods. All in good time. The High Priestess turned to Lotta. Do you feel the concentration of power here? Lotta was silent, focusing on her sensations. When I was a kid, it felt as if I could reach out and touch the gods. But now I can hardly feel their presence. She noticed Volat tilt his head slightly as if her words piqued his interest. But she didn't dare look closely and averted her eyes. The priestess nodded contentedly. Good. You're right. We still have to plant the oak seeds. Then what are we waiting for? They walked with light footsteps, as if their feet weren't even touching the ground, all the way to the other side of the forest in order to find a safe place where they could grow a new sacred tree. The priest found a clearing where the trees weren't so dense, and even the grey sky could be seen. Its soil hadn't known the plough or the tread of man. Even that day was special, chosen by the stars and blessed by the gods. Volat opened his string bag and carefully took out the precious gift. Acorns wrapped in a piece of thick, coarse hemp fabric. The priestess squeezed Lotta's hand and came forward, saying softly, Now watch closely, don't go anywhere, and pay attention to the sounds, no matter what you hear. All right. She felt anxious, but she stood straight, looked confident, showing no fear. The priestess raised her hands to the sky. She began whispering prayers, loud, fast, yet barely audible. Her voice flew over their heads, going straight to their hearts. The old priest sprinkled the ground with spring water, leaving a wet circle. Volat opened a bag of herbs, and echoing the voice of the priestess, scattered them, repeating the other priest's movements. Suddenly Lotta heard the sound of drums, but couldn't figure out where it was coming from. She wanted to look back, but stopped herself in time, remembering the priest's order. I shouldn't. They dug a hole slowly, without interrupting their prayer. Leaning on Volat's arm, the priestess kneeled down carefully and, clutching the acorns to her chest, fell silent. Then she spoke again, pushing the acorns into the ground. Lana watched them as if spellbound. She was afraid to even think about anything, as if her thoughts could interrupt their voices. The priestess covered the acorns with soil and only then looked at Lana. She held out a hand. "Come here." Lana hurried to her and also fell to her knees. "Violet?" The priest approached a bag Lana hadn't noticed before. There was a stirring within, a silent struggle to break free. Lana could see where things were headed. Her hands balled in a fist, and she forced herself to sit still. Her face twitched in the effort of suppressing the horror and disgust bubbling inside of her. Violet took out a piglet. As soon as the animal saw their faces, it squealed, as if realizing what was about to happen, and tried to wriggle out of the priest's merciless grip. "Will you offer this gift to the gods?" It took Lana a moment to realize that the priestess was talking to her. She forced herself to look away from the piglet's twisted snout and looked at the priestess. "This is a test. They want to see whether I'll dare to do it, whether I'll prove that I'm ready to become one of them. What should I do?" So sacrifice the piglet, refuse, ask them not to kill it. Man, I don't know. I mean, this is like my first animal thing, right? I think most people, I don't care who you are, even when out hunting or whatnot, I'm going to refuse. I'm going to refuse this one. Lana would never be able to shed the blood of an innocent creature. She loved animals more than people. They hadn't done anything wrong. They must be killed so that the gods don't disappear completely and can protect us, and yet I can't. The priestess frowned, and while its eyes flashed in disappointment. "Then we'll do it." The next second, Vola cut the piglet's throat in a fast, confident motion, indifferently and ruthlessly. The animal didn't have time to understand what had happened. His body was already lying limply on Vola's hand, and the blood was gushing onto the ground, soaking the soil. Lana stared at him wide-eyed. She was terrified and at the same time reassured that the animal had died quickly and painlessly. The priest formed a circle, lost in the nightmare of reality. Lana mimicked their movements. They joined hands and began to move, ending the prayer, slowly, calmly, as if they could keep going forever. But then the death drums stopped and everything went quiet. Only then did the priestess return to the conversation. "Life always requires sacrifice. If you want to live, you give up your time. Once it's spent, you will meet death. If you want prosperity, you work hard, and with all your strength. Everything comes at a price." The old priest spoke, clearly trying to cheer up Lana. "The tree will grow so high that its crown will reach beyond the clouds up to the seventh heaven where the gods live. There's no other way." "This is our duty. You said you were ready to become one of us, but is that so?" "I mean, I didn't know I'd be killing a piglet today." Levolet remained silent. He looked intimidating, cold-blooded, but he was watching Lana closely. Occasionally she caught him glancing at her hand, so she was constantly pulling at her sleeve, hiding her birthmark. "Give us some time. We'll finish the ceremony." "All right." Lana stepped aside, trying to calm her nerves. "I knew what they'd do. I knew the price of the gods' help, so why am I so sad? Will I ever get used to it?" Lana sat down on the grass and began plucking it thoughtfully. "Perhaps the path of priesthood is not for me, but I have to make sure. I must try to find the courage to choose for myself, even if the price is so high." Her fingers began to tingle. She felt cold as if the sudden onslaught of an icy draught, but there was no wind. The trees stood still, and even the leaves didn't tremble. Lotta blinked a few times. A thin film seemed to cover her eye. She wanted to get rid of that unpleasant feeling. What's wrong with me? She looked around, confused, and even though she could still see well, her heart was beating so hard that her neck and wrists were throbbing. A nasty laughter rang in her ears. Lotta stood up, took a few steps to the side, trying to shake off that unpleasant sound, but it rang in both ears, coming from wherever she turned her head to. The voices transformed laughter, morphed into wild giggling, which then turned into cow mooing, and finally into a catacomb of barking and meowing. Priestess, what is this? Her voice was weak, quiet, and was drowned out by the forced laughter. Lotta tried to reach the priest to get their attention, but she couldn't find them anymore. She turned around once, twice, but no one was there. When she turned around for the third time, she found herself in a completely different place. Finally, Lotta blinked, and the glaze in front of her eyes disappeared. Her confusion seemed to have melted away with it. Leshy? A creature was sitting on a fallen tree, among the pines in the darkness. Thin shoulders were shaking with laughter, which he was trying to suppress. His dirty body, covered with scratches, ingrown twigs, was disgusting. The creature looked lonely, but Lotta's body felt threatened, and her soul was enthralled. Leshy had bewitched Lotta and brought her to him. He continued roaring with laughter, whistling, squelching, screaming, but the noise was kind of strangled, as if he was absorbing it back into himself. The sounds died down in his throat before they could break free. Lotta didn't move, barely breathe, so as not to attract his attention. What the hell is he? She kept looking at him, suddenly aware that she was still under his spell and couldn't move against his will. Seriously, I have no clue what the hell it is. Oh, his head is slowly turning. Wake up. The priest's hard and cold fingers broke the spell. Lotta took a deep breath, relieved to feel the absence of whatever had crawled into her lungs. It was Leshy. I didn't mean to. I know. Let's go back. Lotta allowed him to lead her back. Her arms and legs wouldn't obey her. She felt dazed, sleepy. The old priest gave her St. John's wort to chew so she could come to her senses faster. Lotta sat on the stump listening to the soothing voice of the priestess. It's difficult to protect yourself from Leshy's call, but you will learn. Does Leshy always come so close to the village? The priestess exchanged glances with the old priest. There are many things happening right now that shouldn't be. Come on. I'll brew some herbs for you, and you'll be right as rain. Thank you. She was ashamed of her weakness. She didn't want to be a burden. It seemed that nothing was working out for her again, and it would end up the same way as always. Unable to overcome her weakness, Lotta would remain as worthless as usual, capable of only herding sheep. Did Leshy choose me because I'm weak, or did he summon me for some other reason? Vollet. Vollet and the priestess were walking a few steps behind. The young priest's eyes bored into Lotta's back. He frowned so hard that his mask moved forward, making him look even more menacing. Speak up. I see that you want to ask me something. Why are you doing this? Doing what? Vollet looked once again at Lotta, who was still walking wearily ahead. She was going to need time to recover from Leshy's spell. The priestess smiled. I like Lotta, and I want to help her. She reminds me of myself when I was her age. Her birthmark. You will soon understand what your visions mean, but are you ready to accept them? Bollock clenched his fists.
We don't know what's going on yet, but something is clearly happening, and we should keep our eyes open. Don't be afraid to sleep.
Instead of answering, he quickened his pace and walked past Lana without looking at her to lead the procession. Why do I feel like there's a lot we're missing right now? Lana.
You can change your clothes here. I'll brew you some herbal tea.
All right, thank you. Lana disappeared behind the curtain, took off her cloak, and put her clothes back on. Pulling the curtain aside, Lana froze while it was standing on the doorstep. His head touched the ceiling, and in the semi-darkness, the bull skull seemed to glow with an eerie light. Lana silently sat down at the table. Violet looked at her, his gaze peeking through the holes in the mask was heavy and scrutinizing. Finally he moved, forcing Lana to look up warily to follow his movements. The priest raised his hands and, closing his fists around the skull, took it off his head. He walked over to the table and sat down opposite her. Lost in thought, Lana didn't cover her hand, leaving her birthmark exposed. Violet's sullen gaze fell to her wrist. He made no secret of his interest. There's no point in hiding it, he knows something. Ask him about the birthmark. Achievement unlocked, Chatterbox. You told Tata everything about Violet from your birthmark. Shared the news with the Priestess. Okay. I need those. Nervously licking her suddenly dry lips, Lana lifted her sleeve higher and bared her wrist. What's wrong with me? With you, I don't know. He lifted a finger, pointing at her hand. But that's not just a simple birthmark. It's a tie. To whom, my sisters? Lana felt relieved. She had spoken to the priest openly, and he didn't put her on trial, accusing her of having a cursed soul. Violet, however, still looked tense. Lana didn't understand what exactly was bothering him. The circle's broken. Is it bad? Yes. She wanted to ask more questions, but his reticence was frightening. Lana didn't know when he would run out of patience and put her in her place, and she was afraid of that, of the priest's wrath. But she started with the conversation and had to end it. What does that mean? Violet looked away thoughtfully. He didn't seem to know either. You were born on the same day, a year apart from your older sister. She felt uneasy about him being so well informed, despite the fact that many in the village knew about it. Your connection with Vera was even stronger. Maybe it doesn't mean anything aside from the fact that one of you died. He sank back into his memories, his eyebrows furrowed, heavy with grief, rage. Or maybe it's a warning. There is no protection anymore, and death lies ahead. For some reason, it seemed to Lana that his words were prophetic, and he knew more than he was telling her. She put her hands under the table, suddenly felt uneasy next to him. Something in her heart was telling her to stay away. Violet looked at her as if he had read her mind and agreed with her. His huge hand lay on the table. It seemed so rickety, its rickety legs would break at any moment. Lana thought about the fact that she was there instead of in the field herding sheep without thinking about anything. How did she end up there? Would the priest protect her, or push her in the back, driving her into the haze? The priest stood up. The bench beneath him creaked. You've learned that you're not cursed, but it doesn't bode well. Lana recoiled, afraid that he was looming over her like a menacing wall. Without a word, he went behind the curtains. There was a gap. Lana could see how the priest went to the basin, rinsed his hands, washing off the dried blood. The biglet's squeal echoed in her ears again, but Lana quickly repressed the memory. Once he was done washing his hands, Violet reached for his cloak and untied the knot. Lana's cheeks instantly heated up, but she didn't understand why. She took a deep breath, feeling a strange excitement, and She kept looking, she turned away. She kept looking. Achievement unlocked. Curious Soul. You spied on Ozar and Volan. 20 diamonds. Again, always need that. The priest's face looked as if it had been forged from metal, motionless and stern. What was he thinking about? Did he remember the cries of all the animals he had killed, or was he more worried about the fate of the village? Or maybe he didn't care about either. His hands, long fingers, and rough palms pulled off the cloak, and it fell to his feet. The longer Lotta watched him, the more her breathing grew shallower. What's the matter with me? She could see the outlines of his muscles through his shirt. The priest didn't have to do anything. The clear strength of his body intimidated and attracted her at the same time. No words or unnecessary movements needed. When he pulled at the edge of his fabric and lifted it, exposing his skin, Lotta let out a quiet, involuntary gasp. It was as if she had been waiting for that. As if that was why she had been watching. Hot shame swept over her and she closed her eyes. But her disobedient body rebelled. Her eyes opened again, of their own accord. Ladies, calm down, calm down. His stomach rippled. Every movement emphasized the power of his muscles. As if they didn't belong to a man like any other, as if it wasn't just an ordinary body. Did he also breathe, eat, sleep like other person? Did such bodies really exist? She wasn't really familiar with the male figure, but she had seen men without their shirts on, while they were plowing in the fields or chopping firewood. His body was different from what Lotta was used to seeing. His abdominal muscles were tempting her, guiding her gaze lower and lower until the fabric of his clothes. Lotta could only guess what was hidden under them. Was it merely the curiosity of someone who had not yet learned the mystery of the intimacy shared by a man and a woman, or was she attracted by the priest's magnetic sternness? He stirred you up? Lotta didn't know, burning with shame. I shouldn't, this isn't right. Having managed to calm down her embarrassing reaction, she noticed a series of symbols on his body. They protruded like scars, covering his arms and chest. What are those? Why? She wanted to step closer, to touch the ruins, to feel all the power hidden within them under her fingers. Bullet threw his shirt aside, and Lotta quickly turned away in a fear of being caught. When she dared to look again, the priest was standing by the basin, washing off the droplets of blood that had gotten under his sleeves. What's happening to me? First I spied on Magus, and now the priest. How embarrassing. Yeah, you'll get over it. Finally, the priestess returned with a fragrant brew. Lotta covered her cheeks with her hands, trying to cool her skin down. Drink this. Lotta cradled the mug in both hands and took a sip, thanking her. The priestess peered into her face. Are you feeling sick? The priestess touched her forehead, but Lotta recoiled fearfully. No, not at all. You don't look well. Volux returned from behind the curtain wearing plain clothing. Lotta flinched when she met his gaze and hurriedly lowered her eyes. Her face felt even hotter. You fool, stop it. The priestess waited for Lotta to finish her tea, and having made sure that she was fine, got up. Now I would like you to talk to my grandson. All right. Lotta was visibly nervous. Talking to people she didn't know well unsettled her. She wasn't sure what she was afraid of, but she wanted the meeting to be over as soon as possible. If she had it her way, she would have already spoken with anyone but her sheep. The priestess led her to Magus's room, pulling back the curtain, and said,
Ozar, you have a visitor. Explain everything to the girl.
Lazy reply from the depths of the room. Let her come in. Lana took a timid step and disappeared behind the curtain. Ozar was sprawled out, surrounded by cushions. It looked like he had recently fumigated the room. There was a charred bunch of thistle, rosehip in a bowl on the windowsill. The Magus' attentive, devouring gaze made Leda freeze on the spot. So, you want to be a priestess?
I do.
His voice was slow, hypnotic. His silence was heavy and meaningful. Lottie didn't know what to do with her hands, whether she should keep standing, or sit down, wait for instructions, or bombard him with questions. As if mocking her, the Magus didn't hurry to guide her, but simply watched her as one watches squirrels up a tree, with interest and condescension. Unable to think of anything better to say, Lana asked, "Why do you like lying on cushions?"
The closer I am to the earth, the better I hear the gods.
Lana parted her lips and noticed how his gaze immediately caught that movement. She wanted to ask another question, but his reaction caught her off guard, and she hesitated. Ozar beat her to it. Hold on. Now it's my turn to ask you a question. Why did you agree? What do you want? I want to find out what happened to my sister, have power, find my way, do my part. Find out what happened to my sister. What are you willing to do for the truth? Now it's my turn to ask a question. Why not? Ozar gave a rumbling, approving laugh. Then ask away.
Will you help me?
I can.
How?
I'll ask the gods. Lotta's heart filled with a warm light. Hope fluttered in her chest like a small bird that came back to life after a long slumber. Lotta felt a pleasant excitement spray through her body, making the blood run faster through her veins.
Do they answer you?
Sometimes.
Why only you?
They said that it was my reward for loyalty.
You were born with that mark. A child doesn't know how to be loyal.
You're right. So someone else paid the price for me. Ozar got to his feet. Lotta stepped back, wary of him. I need to take a look at you.
What for?
The human body speaks more about its abilities than any words. He came very close to her, and she could sense the scent of pine needles and herbs. He held out his hand, but stopped an inch from her face. May I? It seemed to her that his eyes flashed in the semi-darkness. He walked slowly around her without taking his eyes off her face, as if appraising her, and then stopped behind her. You don't need to be afraid of me. His hot breath brushed her neck, sending goosebumps across Lana's skin. His whisper caressed her ear, sounded like a spell, intoxicating, alluring. She couldn't help but close her eyes, either with fear or anticipation. His fingers touched her chin, almost weightlessly, gently pressing on it to make her turn her head. Then they traced its contour, moved to lower, brushed her collarbone. She trembled. She felt as meek as a lamb being sheared. She feared him, yet trusted him. Lada could sense her breathing become shallower and her thoughts more tangled, like thin threads on a windy day. Do you have any birthmarks? Her hands involuntarily fiddled with the edge of her sleeve, betraying her nervousness.
Yes.
Show me. Why was she whispering? Why was her voice trembling so much? It was because of him, of course it was. There was something bewitching about Ozor, something captivating. He always spoke quietly, but there was power in his voice that made everyone around him quiet down, hanging on his every word. When Magus's voice dropped to a whisper, time itself stood still. How many women had he lured in with that voice? How many bodies had trembled in the same way under his touch? Lada wanted to move, but couldn't. She couldn't, or didn't actually want to. She felt Ozar smile, his lips touching her earlobe. Only then did she remember that he was what he was asking for and raised her hand. The Magus gently took her wrist and lifted her sleeve. The circle is broken. Every time he spoke, his breath tickled her neck, burning her insides. Her heart was pounding so hard that he could probably hear it beating. Ozar caressed her hand and then pulled her sleeve back up. His chest was pressed against her back.
You're standing too close.
Do you want me to step back?
Say yes. Say...
But she remained silent. He smiled again. Lada took a ragged breath, feeling the touch of his lips again. That's enough. He pulled away. Lada felt cold without the heat of his body, opened her eyes, coming to her senses. Ozar stood looking at her as if trying to make sure that she was completely at his mercy, that his charm was still affecting her. Lada knew that she wasn't really trying to bewitch her, that she was just one who let herself get bewitched. She tried to look down to hide her embarrassment, but her eyes kept going back to him, as if pulled by an invisible force.
Did you find out what you needed to know?
That smile again. The smile of someone who'd conquered her and knew it. Even more than I planned to. Lana felt a burning desire to cover her face with her hands so he wouldn't look at her like that any longer. But what had she done? Nothing had happened, right? Why was she so embarrassed?
What does that mean?
I'll share my thoughts with you when you're ready. Why did she feel like he wasn't talking about her birthmark?
I don't like it.
We won't do it again if you don't want to. Lada felt so hot that she found it hard to breathe. There was still a lot of things she didn't understand, and she didn't know why his words sounded so ambiguous. But the rising heat inside of her was telling her that there was more behind them. She shuddered just thinking about it. On the edge between embarrassment and excitement, she felt that she could unravel. Unravel, that too. My mind's going places to her new facets of her own feelings and desires, all things previously unknown to her. Brushing her hair out of her face, she cleared her throat and said firmly, Ozar will occupy your thoughts.
Which of the things you've learned can you share?
He lay back on a pillow, spread his arms wide, and replied lazily. Not much, really. Lana felt resentment stir in her chest. His appearance, voice, lost their mystery so quickly as if it had never been there.
I shouldn't be so impressionable.
Is something wrong? No. Where were we?
What did you conclude by looking at my birthmark?
Realizing the Ozar wasn't fazed by what had just happened, Lotta managed to calm down. She reminded herself that it was just how the Ozar was, fickle like the wind and distant like the gods. Birthmarks are imprints, messages. Any message can be interpreted in different ways. It also matters who left it for you.
Wasn't it gods?
Do you hear their voices?
We all do. No, I don't. How do you know it's the god's voice and not your own?
I'm gonna go with no, I don't. There's your answer.
Thoughts swarmed in her head, each one more contradictory than the next, creating chaos that Lotta couldn't soothe. Who, if not the gods, could have left the message?
That I do not know.
He cocked his head to one side, continuing to examine her. The Magus seemed to be looking through her, while at the same time being able to observe her slightest movements. Also, I can't see your future.
Will the bad news never cease? Why?
Because it hasn't been written yet. There are too many paths. You're at a crossroads. There are dark paths, there are light ones.
How do you know which ones are dark and which one is light?
You don't. You take a path, that's it. He fell silent, and Lotta was silent too. She understood that something important was happening in her life. She could feel the familiar world starting to crumble. She didn't know what would remain. A deserted shore near the surface of a silent river, or a wasteland where not a single oak tree would grow.
It doesn't matter, whatever happens, I must put my sister's spirit to rest. So will you help me find out what happened to Varia?
The gods are weak. I don't ask them for help, even though I know I can. There must be good reason for it.
Is my sister's death not good enough a reason?
No, not for me. Lotta clenched her fists in frustration and stubbornly stepped forward.
Her death is clearly connected with everything else that's going on right now. The oak tree dies, Leshy comes too close to the village, the haze thickens. All this is happening for a reason.
Do you think I care about all of this?
Lotta was so taken aback that she was at a loss for words.
Lotta.
His soft, velvety voice sounded tired, but at the same time heartfelt. Coming from his lips, her name took on some sort of power, as something intimate and personal were hiding behind it. Lotta didn't know her name could sound like that.
Do you know why I'm the Magus and not a priest?
You can hear the gods and see the future.
I don't see it, I witness it. I watch what the gods show me, and the gods can be cruel. Their cruelty cannot be compared to the human cruelty. It is divine. It poisons you, dulls your senses. He gestures around the room. I'm merely an observer and a storyteller. I know our story's written, and I am ready to accept any outcome. She didn't believe him, for some reason. His eyes attracted her, gleaming more and more in the semi-darkness, deep, dark, like whirlpools. Something vague flickered in them, suggesting some kind of trick. His voice remained calm, but his eyes were saying something else. Lotta saw her doubts reflected in them, together with the shadows of intentions and unspoken thoughts. There was something more behind his words, perhaps insidious, or on the contrary, filled with a secret kindness. One thing was clear. He wasn't going to share what was on his mind. Every word he had said until then seemed to be imbued with a double meaning. Lotta knew she had to figure out what that hidden meaning was before she could trust him. So I shouldn't count on your help.
Why not?
I will help you. There was something frightening about his words, promising uncertainty and risk.
What sort of reward do you want from me?
Ozar smiled. You'll spend the night with me.
She froze, feeling like everything inside of her clenched with resentment and shock. She stared at him, unable to believe he had said the words out loud. She saw a mocking grin in his gaze, and that hurt her even more. Her cheeks heated up with anger, her expression making no mystery of her bitter disappointment. Her voice trembled, but she tried to speak firmly, looking him straight in the eye. Never.
Why not?
He seemed genuinely surprised.
Why would you want that? What do you mean when you ask me to spend the night with you?
It's a stupid question. No,
I'm the one who's stupid. What else would he mean by that?
Many women chose not to remain chaste and instead embraced the excitement of life. But Lotta was not one to grab at every opportunity life presented her with. We'll only do what you expect from that night.
Okay, we're gonna play a game of Scrabble then. Expect or want? What does he mean by that?
She repeated firmly.
No.
You think very little of me, but have it your way. My abode is always at your disposal.
Lotta didn't say goodbye. She turned on her heel and hurried away. When she grabbed the curtain, Ozar called after her.
Come when you make up your mind.
Man's giving me a creak in the neck. When she arrived home, everyone was already asleep. The silence was so deafening that Lotta covered her ears and squeezed her eyes shut. Her room felt so empty without her sister's bed that her heart sank. I'm sorry, Varia. Lotta felt she had kicked her sister out of her room. She shuddered when the window slammed open, hitting the wall. She rolled on her side and looked at the piece of sky she could glimpse through the gap. Lotta thought indifferently and wearily. It's Varia, the breath of the haze, the wrath of the gods.
Let's just go with Varia.
She reluctantly got up and closed the window. Lotta returned to the bed, exhausted by the events of the day. Sleep engulfed her in an instant, dragging her to the very bottom of the darkness. It seemed an eternity that had passed while she was wandering in the maze of dreams, when suddenly she felt she was floating back up. Something was pulling her to the surface, calling her name. Her eyes shot wide open. Is the bed back? What the hell? Okay. I give you a 4 out of 5. I'm not gonna lie, man. It's just... Alright. So, 3 haste. 3 haze, wow. 2 ties, 1 determination, 2 companionship, or compassion. Wow, my brain! I need a break. It's just been a long day. And I got my diamonds. So, I'm just gonna be honest with you guys, right? If someone can explain to me what any of this means. Listen, I know there's the ties. It's usually things around your sister. Haze is the haze. Reality is reality. And then I get compassion and determination. But I just don't understand haze and reality. Ties, I get. It's something that you're like, hey, it might be my sister. You know, I usually pick those moments because it's ties. But haze is right up there. Reality, I don't. Again, I'm trying to make sense of this book. And again, maybe it just might be the long day I've had. But it just, I don't get it fully. So maybe someone can explain to me, like, what's... Am I screwing up? That's about the best way to put it. Am I screwing up? Am I picking something that I'm not? Like, should I be leaning more towards Haze? Should I be leaning more towards reality? Like, should I focus only on ties when it pops up? Like, I just feel like I don't know what to do there. Compassion, that's a given. Determination, it's a hit or miss, right? Like, I pick things as I go, as I feel, right? I kind of been doing the same with the other things, but I just don't want to... I don't want to fall too behind on something if something's important, but I don't really know. So, yeah, no. Aside from that... once again, hopefully you guys did enjoy. Please make sure you like, share, and subscribe if you did. So, aside from that, episode 6, Various Spirit beckons you to follow. But where will it take you? So, yeah. Aside from that, stay tuned. As you can tell, I've been trying to catch up on quite a few things. So, yeah. Aside from that, catch you all later. Peace out.